Welcome back to our YouTube tutorial. Today, I'll guide you through setting up and configuring Splunk Indexer Clustering. I've set up for new servers, and each one has a fresh installation of Splunk Enterprise. For this setup, we need 3 indexers and a dedicated server for the cluster master. Let's jump in and get everything working smoothly. I've also configured the 4 servers on Mobaxterm for convenient and easy management. Let's SSH into the 4 servers, and I'll show you the configurations we've made. The initial step is to check the IP address. Ensure that each server has a configured static IP address. Next, let's check the hostname. Also, let's verify the Splunk status to ensure it's up and running. Let's also inspect the server's internal firewall to ensure that port 8000 is enabled. Now, let's proceed to access the Splunk web on our browser. Here I've bookmarked each server for easy access and management. Let's open and log into each Splunk web using the admin credentials. Additionally, I've taken steps to enhance security by enabling HTTPS for the Splunk web interface. In the video description, you'll find a link providing detailed instructions on how to enable HTTPS for your Splunk setup. Let's dive into configuring and setting up indexer clustering. First, we'll start by configuring the manager node, also known as the cluster master. Let's access the Splunk Cluster Master's web interface and log in using the admin credentials. Click on Settings, then enter Distributed Environment. Navigate to Indexer Clustering. Click on Enable Indexer Clustering by default. The manager node is selected. Click Next to proceed with the configuration. Now, let's talk about replication factor and search factor. With our 3 Splunk indexers, we're good to stick with the default value set by Splunk. Remember, the search factor will always be less than the replication factor. As we move forward, let's also focus on another crucial aspect: the security key and cluster label. Although labeled as optional, it's important to set this up, especially in multi-site clustering, and it's highly recommended for security purposes. After successfully inputting the configurations, Let's click on Enable Manager node and restart Splunk to apply the configuration changes. After the restart, log back in, and let's verify the indexer clustering configuration in the web GUI. On the Manager node web UI, you should see details of the Splunk cluster masters such as hostname, URI, and the status of the Splunk service. The next step is to configure each Splunk indexer as a peer node. Let's access one of the indexer servers via Splunk Web. Log in using the admin credentials, and then navigate to Settings, and click on Indexer Clustering. Now, let's click on Enable Indexer Clustering and select Peer Node to proceed with the configuration. Here in the Peer Node configuration, we need to set up three things. First, the Manager URI, or the Splunk Cluster Master URI, but ensure the port is set to 8089. For peer replication port, select any open port. For the setup, I'll use 8090. As for the security key, it should match the key we set up on the cluster master or manager node. Please be aware that upon saving this configuration, we might encounter an error on port connection 8089 in the replication port. Since we haven't enabled these ports, let's proceed to enable port 8089 and port 8090 in the internal firewall of each server. To do that, SSH into each server and follow the commands on the screen to enable these ports. Enable port 8089 for internal connections on all 4 servers. Additionally, enable port 8090 exclusively for the peer nodes or Splunk indexers. Don't forget to reload the firewall to apply the changes. After that, let's verify if the ports are enabled correctly. Now that we have enabled the ports, let's proceed to save the configuration for peer node indexer number 1. Ensure that the configuration is saved without errors, and then restart Splunk. While waiting for the Splunk service of indexer number 1 to be up and running, let's navigate to the Cluster Master Management web GUI. Verify under the Peer tab that the details of indexer number 1 are reflected. Now that the service status of indexer number 1 is up, let's repeat the same process for the 2 remaining indexers. Now that we have finished configuring all 3 peer nodes, check the Cluster Master Management web UI to ensure that all 3 indexers are reflected. Verify the status of the following settings. Some data is not searchable, search factor is not met, and replication factor is not met. It may take some time for all configuration settings to be updated. Confirm that the icons have changed to check marks once the configurations are in order. Thank you for joining us in this tutorial. If you found this information valuable, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more Splunk tutorials. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to leave a comment below. Stay tuned, and happy clustering.